This Day is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. Hello and welcome to This Day, a history podcast from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, March 1976, the song I'm Just a Bill debuts in episode 5 of season 3 of Schoolhouse Rock. Schoolhouse Rock was a series of 3-minute animated segments that were squeezed in among ABC's Saturday morning cartoon programming. It appeared on ABC from 1973 through 1985. And I think it's safe to say that I'm Just a Bill is probably the breakout star song of the whole series. It continues to have a life today. It pops up on social media from time to time. It gets memed. SNL lampooned it not that long ago, about 10 years ago. As you may know, it's a song that tells the story of how a bill becomes a law.
I gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill.
Local residents take it to the representative who writes it up and sends it to committee where it can then go to the House for a vote, then the Senate, then the president who hopefully doesn't veto it.
But I know I'll be a law someday, at least I hope.
You probably know the song, but listeners, do you know what the bill in I'm Just a Bill was actually intended to do? So take a second and try and guess or see if you remember. But it is actually a bill about making school buses stop at railroad crossings, which seems like a very good idea, very reasonable. So it is good that at the end it does become a law. But let's talk about I'm Just a Bill, Schoolhouse Rock, and debate what feels most dated, the animation or the idea that government would enact change by methodically putting legislation through the traditional bipartisan process. So here,
crazy
as
talk.
always, Nicole Hammer of Vanderbilt and Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
Sorry to have put this into your head.
I have been singing it all morning.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate earworm. It really is.
And there's worse things to have as an earworm. Let's paint the picture of Schoolhouse Rock, because that's a huge kind of bigger theme for me, is just sort of civic education. But how does it come to be that these 3-minute sketches in the sort of post-Watergate America show up trying to educate America's youth about how good old government should work?
Honestly, you got to give it up for Richard Nixon, which is not something I say very often.
Clip
And
that,
in fact,
meme it, loop it.
And in fact, no, you actually don't. So Richard Nixon was at war with the press, as folks know, and he has a tool at his disposal, which is the Federal Communications Commission. And he is trying to sort of bully these different outlets into adhering more to the public interest part of their licensing requirement. And so he's pushing for more of this public interest broadcasting. So under all of this scrutiny on network television, the networks come together and they're like, okay, well, we can do a little educational programming, sure. How about cartoons? Because this is also the era where you're starting to get the rise of Saturday morning cartoons.
Yes.
And so ABC actually kind of brilliantly is like, let's make these little short cartoons and we'll sneak them in, just like you might sneak some zucchini into the pancakes to make sure that your kid is getting a little bit of vegetable. Except they taste so much better than zucchini. They taste like the chocolate chips because these are really good little... God, I'm really hungry. These are really good little cartoons that air as part of the programming block on Saturday mornings.
Yes, and it's a vibe. It's a bop because the music, that's what gets you, is the music.
Yeah.
Like, I absolutely love, the song definitely becomes an earworm. It definitely gets stuck in your ear. But also as a kid, that is how I've remembered certain things. You know, it's like when you learn the alphabet, you sing the ABCs. Like when you sing the song, next thing you know, you're like, oh yeah, okay, I do know this. And you just kind of play the song in your head again, and you can pull whatever knowledge you need from that little bop. So it was cool in that way. It's also interesting too that not only is this like a song or a cartoon, but it gets nominated for a Grammy, like for best recording for children. I was like, there's a category for that. There's a category for everything. But yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, they hire jazz musicians, which is also, I mean, that's one of those things like in the 1950s they would not have gotten away with, but by the 1970s they hire some pretty excellent musicians and singers to do this music.
Yeah, so the main engine behind it is this guy, Bob Duro, who actually starts writing songs as multiplication rock and then quickly turns it into Schoolhouse Rock with a little bit more of the sort of larger education and civic education. But yeah, he's an acclaimed jazz musician. And then I'm Just a Bill was written by Dave Frischberg, who was a jazz pianist and singer. And then the voice in there is this guy named Jack Sheldon, who sang the vocals. And you know, I read a Jack Sheldon obit recently, and I mean, he's incredibly accomplished actor, singer. He was part of the kind of like West Coast jazz movement in the 50s. He played with Art Pepper and Stan Kenton and Lena Horne and Benny Goodman. And, you know, I think he was Merv Griffin's like sidekick for many years on TV, and he played trumpet on the Henry Mancini's soundtrack. So yeah, these are like real accomplished folks, which you can hear in the songs. Like it's a good, well-composed song. Like a really interesting, long, very rangy melody. Like actually a little hard to sing because it's like a really long melody that goes way up and down. It's a legit good song.
Can I say my favorite song though was Conjunction?
Oh yes,
Conjunction.
Function?
Junction.
Or,
What's your function?
What's your function?
Yeah. Hooking up words and making them sound. Like it was like that to me was just like it was so much fun. It was so much fun.
Did you catch this in real? Because we're just of the age where it was.
I mean, none of us caught it
for real,
in
but
the
it was
mid-70s.
But it was kicking. No, but in the early. But it went through the early 80s. I mean, but do you have memories of actually seeing this in reruns or kicking around, or is it just kind of seeped in?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was I was reading through the names of some of these, and I think like Conjunction Junction and I'm Just a Bill have gotten reiterated in movies like Reality Bites and things like that. So those have stuck around in a particularly sticky way. But then I was reading about like Mother Necessity, and I can't remember how the song goes, but I can see all of the visuals from it. So definitely sometime in those early formative years watching Saturday morning cartoons, that one burrowed in somewhere.
Yeah. I feel like I can't remember when I watched it or the first time, but it was definitely always a part of like a soundtrack to my childhood where there's, you know, like certain commercials or something that just stick with you and you don't realize how you like the Double Mint commercial or something like that. I always feel like I have these things that are like, oh yeah, childhood. Like that's one of those songs for sure.
Yeah. And there's a larger context here of kind of the rise of children's programming, but it being done in a kind of very like sophisticated way with like real talented folks. And I think there's like, you know, children's programming does this, like it starts really high and then it kind of really bottoms out as you get into like the 90s. But, you know, like this is the era of like Free to Be You and Me, and Sesame Street is coming up at this point too. Yeah. And like, you know, there's like legit good animation and music being done as part of this. But you were going to defend I
want to speak up for the 90s.
Children's program of the 90s, yeah.
Animaniacs.
Well, that's true.
Oh, yes.
They had these like super educational songs that were very fast and catchy. Yeah. And because they were so, they hit rhymes in really interesting ways.
Yes.
So that's my vote.
And there are still very smart, sophisticated children's programming out there. Shout out to my pals at the Story Parrots. But then there's also the Coco Melons of the world right now in a way that there was not. Yes, I know. Sorry to say the forbidden word.
You can see the trauma just take over Kellie's face.
There's some children's shows that I love, and then there are other ones that I'm like, I cannot like.
You know, I blocked Coco Melon. I went into the Netflix settings and I just straight up blocked it. And then my daughter was like, "Where'd Coco Melon go?" And I was like, "I don't know. It must have been some rights dispute or something, but you can't watch it anymore." Oh my gosh,
Coco Melon and Baby Shark. Yeah. I'm like, if I hear it one more time.
I love that Jody turned it into, we're going to sing a song about copyright law.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
NPR's Throughline podcast sort of feels like stepping into a time machine. Each episode, our Peabody Award-winning show travels beyond the headlines to answer the question, how did we get here? Listen to one of Apple's favorite podcasts of 2024 by searching for Throughline on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app.
So, I'm Just a Bill. It is pretty straightforward as I described it, right? It talks about a sort of process going through. I mean, we should say that, like, there's a reason that the bill that's being passed is one about school buses stopping at train tracks. In 1971, 5 students were killed about 25 miles north of New York City when a freight train hit a school bus. This was an actual sort of issue that needed to be addressed.
Which is an interesting thing as you get into the song and you're watching the animation, because they show the bill just sort of languishing in committee, and then it goes to the House, and then it languishes in committee, and it goes to the Senate. But as it's like sitting outside the door waiting to be voted on, you hear these senators like yelling at one another. They're just fighting it out. And it's like, wait, this is so school buses will stop it.
Who's the anti-school bus stopping?
The kids died.
The stakes are not that high in terms of like how much this is going to cost. And you know what I mean? Like, it just seemed a lot more contentious. But also you kind of get, because the bill is sort of like, I don't know, I was saying earlier, he has this like sort of Bob Newhart vibe to him, like sort of womp womp, like just very like can't seem to win for losing kind of I don't know, personality to him. But yeah, it does seem interesting that this is how, like, the purpose that they would use to create this law.
But that sort of hangdog Eeyore, I think, Niki, you called it, vibe of the bill. Is it too much to read into the fact that that feels like a very 1976 thing? Like the idea that like legislation and government doing good things, that someone trying to work their way through that would feel a little put upon and just sort of sit there with their shoulders slumped and their feet hanging off the steps. I mean, that does feel like we're coming off of that era, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's where America was. America was in its Bob Newhart phase. What's interesting, though, is that here's a word I actually can say. It was during the bicentennial.
Yeah.
Like, the reason why Schoolhouse Rocks was focusing on government during this period was because they're celebrating all of these wonderful things about America. And here you have this like mopey bill that's just like, want, no one will pass me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it has as we should remind listeners, it has a happy ending.
It does.
The president signs his forehead, and then he gets to become a law, which he seems a lot happier after that.
And a happy ending and a real kind of, faith at the heart of it all, right? That good government can do good in the end, and there is a process by which it can do that, and, we can continue to sort of create progress. And so I guess now, 50 years later, what do we make of that? Especially as we head into another, oh my God, what is it called? Semi-quincentennial?
Can't do it.
Gosh, yes.
But, that feels very antiquated right now. That a bunch of good faith people would get together and go through a process to have a bill become a law.
Does anybody have something that rhymes with reconciliation?
Yeah, I know. The only thing that still, I would say, tracks is the idea of the bill sort of languishing. This idea that no one's like always kind of picked last, like never sort of gets a chance to sort of show themselves. I mean, how many times have we talked about gridlock and just the inability to pass anything that has just been so frustrating, to say the least, that, a lot of these good ideas never come to see the light of day because of this process.
I mean, imagine this today, and it's just like animation of a bill graveyard where all of these good bills go to die. And then instead of like having the House and the Senate debating on it, you just have the president up there proclaiming, I will tell you what the law is. It's a little less upbeat than 76.
We're even at the point now where I don't even think there are good bills dying. I just don't think good bills are being proposed.
Bills.
Right?
No, there are no bills.
The only bills
There's
out
no
there are
bills.
sort of culture war proclamations.
Yes.
I mean, literally, I went last week and looked at sort of the record to see what's being proposed in Congress, since they seem to be pretty absent, and it's really just like it's kind of stunning. So SNL did a parody of this 10 years ago, but did get a little bit at this. It's a very good parody. I feel like people 10 years ago felt like SNL wasn't at a great moment, and I remember when this came out, people were like, oh wow, like SNL still kind of got it, like this was really good. But want to walk us through that and whether it gets to some of the sort of more modern concerns that we're discussing here?
Sure. I just watched it this morning, and it's so funny. This was, of course, during the Obama era, and they sing the first part of the song about how a bill becomes a law, and then the person playing Barack Obama comes up and he's like, rolls out the executive order, and it's like, I'm just an executive order.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Because once the executive order is issued, that's the new law of the land. And of course, executive orders aren't laws, but it's so funny because you have like the bill keeps trying to become a law and Barack Obama keeps pushing it down the stairs. And it is a commentary on the way that, especially because bills are so hard to pass, that the executive order has become a workaround. I mean, it is sort of like pitched as Barack Obama being a bully, but underlying it is, well, you can't get anything done because Congress won't pass any legislation.
Yeah.
Do you think Trump saw that 10 years ago and got an idea? I wonder.
I'm not sure he could track it, but sure.
Yeah, no.
All
More
right.
likely he watched Napoleon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll be very curious to see as we head into next year and the 250th celebration of this country, whether kind of some of this stuff comes back. And I don't know, I guess one final thought is I do think like some basic civic education is actually quite important. And I know that it's closely tied, as this story shows, to like the media environment, right? And the way that, and the reason Schoolhouse Rock worked was because it was just like on a channel that, you know, was like one of 4 places that kids were watching TV. And so like everyone saw it, everyone got the same lessons, et cetera, you know. So I think there needs to be more programming like this and more like basic civic, you know, I just think like we've totally corroded a basic understanding of how government works. But also, we need to fix a media environment in which that stuff can actually break through. And I don't know. Though I do think, again, like I think next year, potentially the 250th, could be one of those moments where like people just check in for all sorts of reasons and say like, oh, yeah, well, how is this American experiment going, you know? And we'll see how that plays out. That's not, you know, I'm not necessarily hopeful about how that conversation will go. But
Birthdays are supposed to be times of reflection, especially the older you get. You know, you sort of look back on your life like, should I have a midlife crisis, or like, have I done have I done what I set out to do? You know, like that kind of moment. I do think that people are a little bit more reflective around some of this time. But, you know, how long that lasts and like if that's just a feeling and if that doesn't translate into anything actionable, then, you know, maybe not.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've mentioned it on the show before, but we have some sort of big plans for doing stuff around the 250th. And I think I have that same instinct. You know, it is a chance to kind of be a little reflective and maybe learn some lessons and come out of your mid-country crisis. So we'll see. All right.
Let's hope.
That's the end of the episode. Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
It's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill, now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
Radiotopia.